Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Midseason ratings. It is a joy and a pleasure to be back amongst y'all gamers. My name is Anthony. I will be your host for this evening, and I'm joined by.
I'm your co-host Brady Shot, and it's a pleasure to be ranking and chilling out with all of you. So, looking forward to talking to you guys about this.
Well, welcome, one and all. And might I say, we have had quite the amazing season so far. I was kind of blown away by how many people have just taken to this like a duck on out of water. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Ducks, do you
Get
get
it?
it?
Because there's a duck team
Do you
now.
get the
Whoa,
joke? Do you get the joke?
that please explain.
But yeah, people have been really into it, and it just warms my heart. It warms my heart. So thank you all for having a great season so far. Now let us, destroy you with critiques. But
Hooray!
but yeah, you have anything to say about this season so far?
Yeah, I think everyone's been playing incredibly well so far. We've had some incredibly close matches. We've had double KO wins, and those have been phenomenally done so far. Anthony's really proud of that one.
Yeah, real proud.
Which is, I think that everyone's doing phenomenally. I think that a lot of people here are very, very new, and even if they are new, they are playing well beyond. I think even what they originally started at inside of the season. I think everyone's grown a lot. So I think people are doing phenomenally, and I can't wait to talk to you guys about your team some more. So.
Well, alrighty. With that, we know we don't want to take up too much of your time, so we'll get right into the power rankings. So, starting out at number 10, there does always have to be a number 10. And in this case, it was Mateo, Matty C, um, with his team Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. So, Brady, why don't you take it away and tell us your notes on this team?
Sure. So I ranked this team total. I gave it a 5 out of 10. To kind of discuss how that's done, we broke our rankings down into three separate categories, and I'll kind of describe those three separate categories now. One is by the inherent power of your team. So that's the first category that I ranked it by, which is a lot of what we were talking about in the preseason. But for those of you who have changed their teams, and for those of you who are new, this will be a lot of new information for you. The next one that we ranked it by was your current play, so how you've been playing inside of your games given your team's composition. And then your final attribute that we're ranking you by is by your potential. So what we're looking at your future games and going, how does your team compare to the other teams that you're going to be put up against? So without further ado, let me kind of break this down for CBT here.
And before you go off, I want to mention that the preseason did not take skill level into. As Brady said, this does, but the preseason was just based on your teams. This is based on your play, the rest of your season. It's a comprehensive look. So
Absolutely.
All right. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, that was a good addition. So from the top, I always start this out by saying +1 for having the balls to take by barrel first in your Next, I think Mega T-Tar was an excellent grab for your team. It allows you to build a proper sand team that can really deal some damage between Weavile, Excadrill, Zapdos, and your Mega. I think all of those put together are a really solid core of Mons, and I think that it's going to be really scary to fight that. So one thing that my previous note was you had a serious Stealth Rock weakness, which you've mitigated a lot, which is very, very good for your team, so that's phenomenal. I think this team still has a weakness for both ground and water, and with Tyranitar being grabbed, you kind of still have that issue, unfortunately, which isn't probably the best thing, so you might still consider taking a Grassmon up and seeing how that would fare inside of your team. Maybe that'll be a little bit more helpful, maybe not. So those are kind of some of the. Oh, and I forgot to add this as well because this was a previous note. One of the problems that I wasn't a huge fan of for your team last time was Gardevoir was a little bit frail. and it being your only fairy type kind of made for a scary introduction to any dragon mons that were coming into your team. But now that you're running this team, I think between Tyranitar's natural bulk, I think with Excadrill's natural bulk, and then also the addition of Sylveon onto your team, I think that you're going to be able to handle dragon types a lot better.
I'm just realizing. Sorry to interrupt. This is the old team, so I'll switch back to the standings. But we will be going through everybody's page, so get doxxed. But since that isn't updated, I'll just keep it on the the main page.
So that for those reasons alone, I ranked your team composition in of itself as an 8. I think that's a really strong team now. That being said, I think that your preparation for fights it has not been as good as it could be. I think a lot of your games have suffered as a result of this. So my advice would be to just get more experience with your team. I mean, that's fundamentally your team has your back as much as you have its, and the only way that you're going to fundamentally understand how to use all of them is just through using them repeatedly over and over, or trying to understand what other people have done with those mons, looking them up on Smogon to see, hey, what are the best strategies with this mon, and then using those strategies and seeing the weaknesses and seeing if you can mitigate them for your upcoming fights. So I think, either going onto Smogon, like I said, and looking that up, or if you want, coming to Thursday Night Roundtable where we discuss upcoming games and potential builds for Pokemon. I think either of those would be super helpful. I think that'd be really, really good for your team. So I think those would help. So I rated team preparation thus far and play as a 2 out of 10. And then I think your upcoming fights, so your potential, I think that they're going to be challenging with your team comp. However, your strong team composition means that if you rely on your Pokemon's natural strengths, I think that you really stand a good chance in winning a fair number of these games. So you're definitely not out of the running. But that being said, just looking at your future games, I would highly recommend spending some time and preparing with a great deal of scrutiny. So I rated that 4 out of 10 for you. So overall, with all that said, I rated you 5 out of 10. So that's my ranking. Anthony, did you have anything to add that I didn't say?
Yeah. So, man, this team, I really, really like this team, and I really want to see it do well. I mean, it's not perfect. You're right. It's not perfect. It has weaknesses, but like it's strong. It's got good threats. I'm especially scared of the Genesect. I think you can really play that very well into a lot of these other teams that don't really, because a lot of people don't consider Bug. It's not the strongest typing, but a mon like Genesect can really use it, especially considering its unique ability, which lets it use any of its lets it change a very powerful move into any typing, depending on the item it holds. So I mean, I really want to see this team go well. And then on top of that, I feel like when you do come in, you make instinctually good moves, right? Like your play isn't perfect, and but when you're in, you're making correct moves. For the most part, the problem is you just don't know what the exactly which moves are going to be good on Mon. So like you bring special attacking moves on an attack based Mon. So I think like literally like 30 minutes of prep with one of us, or just looking through, okay, this Mon is attack based, so X moves are going to work way better on it, kind of thing. Like that would totally change the playing field, and I think you would start to see some really good results out of that. So it just kills me because I like this team, I like the way you play, but it just needs a little bit of good prep. So if that can happen, I would not be surprised to see this team take some wins. But as it is right now, it's going to be a little tough. So yeah, that's my advice. Is same as Brady. Just a little bit of prep would go a long way. So All right. Next in line, we have Will or Booba at number 9. So let's see. I don't know if he's made his page either. No, but I don't believe he switched anything, so this is accurate. Um, so do we do you have something to start us off, Brady?
Sure. Let me go ahead here. So I ranked LFS. I ranked you as a 5 out of 5 out of 10. 5.5 out of 10. So I liked, like I said before, your Fairy Dragon Steel Core is phenomenal. I think majority of your mons are weak to steel, but the ones that aren't are incredibly hard counters to steel, which is amazing. I think that your Dark Fighting Psychic Core is also pretty solid. Very solid mons that cover each other's weaknesses well. Mega Lucario and Latias in particular are pair incredibly well together, so that's awesome. So a lot of good stuff going on there. I don't think that Tyranitar really adds anything to your team, unfortunately. I think that it's kind of a hindrance more than it is a help. A lot of your team does not appreciate the sand chip, especially with the tankier mons. So as a result, they're going to suffer the more and more that Tyranitar stays in. So that's just a thought. That's a consideration that I would also make. Um, so I ranked your team like I ranked last time. I ranked you an 8 out of 10, so that stayed consistent. Um, However, one thing that I didn't talk about before was playstyle because we didn't have any information on it. So I think that your playstyle thus far hasn't been very well defined. From what I've been able to gather from your teams, you have a lot of moves and sets that are considered optimal for every single mon, right? But the problem is, if you run those sets on your mons, a lot of times those mons won't work in conjunction with one another. Like, let's say that you look everything up on like Smogon, like what's the best move set for this mon? And it might give you a great move set. But that being said, does that move set work well with another mon's move set? Maybe not. And so as a result, I think a lot of your mons have weird overlap in areas, and there's other areas where your team kind of has a gap in what it's able to do. Um, and another thing is, I think the beautiful part about playing a draft Pokemon League is that you know who you're going to be fighting ahead of time. So looking at your enemy's team, you can customize your team a lot more ahead of time, and that will allow you to more easily exploit their weaknesses. And I think that's another avenue that hasn't really been explored here. Which I think is a little bit of an issue when you're going into these fights because a lot of people have some hard checks to some of your mons that you don't have proper answers for because you look at that and go, oh man, this is a real problem for my team. So just a couple of thoughts there on the preparation and play style. I think that if you can get over that hurdle and you can start adding some creativity into your team, I think that this team is very solid and I think that it'll prove itself to you. So that's and so then I ranked in that area. I ranked you as a 3 out of 10. Um, but last, your potential going forward, your team is incredibly strong. There's no getting around that fact. I think that you've got a lot of bulk, and I think you've got a good special physical divide. Um, all I would say going forward is I think that with a little bit more customization into your team, a little bit more thought into each battle, I think that your team can really start to succeed. So that's how I would go forward, and that's how I would look forward to really advance your potential even further. So I ranked that part as a 6 out of 10 because, like I said, I think that your team has a lot of inherent strength. So that's all that I had there. Anthony, did you have anything to add?
Yeah. So same general points. Really good team. I think even the first power ranking I was with you on the Tyranitar. Looking at the team again, I'm not super mad about it. It helps with. I don't know. I feel like he's got some strong Dark Mons, some strong Fairy Mons, some strong Steel Mons, which can really move around each other. All right. The sand chip is a problem, but if he just brings a nerve, it's fine. So like, there's a lot better Mons out there. I suggest you switch, but it's not as big of a detriment. So this is a good team. The only major thing I'd add is that um, I think sometimes during play, I can see some blunders, right? And I think a lot of that is it just boils down to inexperience, right? So like you just haven't played enough and therefore you forget to do things. Like I think in one of your recent games you forgot to mega, or some games it feels like you pushed moves a little too fast without thinking about what the enemy is going to do, and knowing what the enemy is going to do just kind of comes from experience, right? So that's playing Smogan, that's playing your team against other teams. Sometimes I'll even set up a phantom enemy team to play against, but nobody's asking you to prep that much. But uh, taking a second and thinking about, okay, well, I'm in, what is the opponent going to do, logically? If they think I have the X move, what are they going to do? I think that could really benefit you as well. But that being said, if you slow down and take a little more time and then look at what the opponent's team is both before and during the game, I think this team can really take you pretty far. So that's all I got to say. All right. I'm going to do that every time, aren't I? Next up, we had Reagan GeekDeer at number 8. Oh Snap Shifu, OSS. So, Brady, what'd you have on Reagan?
Yeah, so I think I ranked you overall at around a 5.5 as well. And why I ranked that way, I really like I said before, your Infernape Mew Bisharp combo. I think that's really nice, and I think they can work really well together. Assuming that Mew is a special attacker in that case. I liked the idea of Thundurus on a sand team. I think that that's really, really nice for you to have because you have both the ability to resist ground, and so if somebody tries to switch in on you or try to use that move against you in the sand, it doesn't really work as well. So I think that's awesome, and that's a really good mon on your team. I like Seismitoad well enough. I think that water absorbability could be really, really good. He's a counter to ground and rock mons, which is really nice for your team. I think in my first assessment, so I ranked your power lower before than I think that I should have. On my first assessment of your team, I didn't really give credit where credit was due, especially when it came to your Mega and how it paired with Lunala. I think those two pair incredibly well together, and I think the strength of your Mega has been proven to be a huge asset to your team time and time again, just because A, it's bulky, but B, it's fast, and C, it can do a lot of crap with that ability parental bond. So I think I underrated the strength of your team, and I think that in your games you've really just proved time and time again that has been a huge boon and asset to you. I still think that Lunala and a sand team is kind of a little bit of a dangerous combination. I just think that losing Shadow Shield on sand chip is just very unfortunate. So that's something to definitely consider. So I think that I would rank your power in terms of your team's composition at around a 6. I would say your play thus far has been good. I think that there's room to improve for sure. But so far it has been good. I think that you have made some pretty solid plays here and there. I think that like Seismic Toss, predicting different mons coming in on your Mega has been incredibly helpful just to get that natural chip coming in on that switch. So that I've seen people really be terrified of, and I'm terrified of in a way. And then just overall play, I think that there's a lot that's good there. I think that in some ways, running Mew how you are, I appreciate the idea of stored power and cosmic power put together. I myself run cosmic power on one of my mons that I've been successful with before. One thing that I would recommend in terms of play there is I would say try to remove Mew's checks before you start doing that. Because unfortunately, if Mew gets toxic or if somebody can stall out Mew, then Mew now has wasted a good portion of its health, and you've wasted some time on your team that you could have spent doing otherwise. So that's one recommendation that I would make for you. Mew is an incredibly versatile mon, and it's got so much to offer. I would just say run it a little differently every single game so that people can't predict what's going on with your Mew. and it'll make that mon a lot scarier. So overall, I ranked your play as a 5. And then finally, in terms of your potential, I like your team. I think that you've got some good potential. I think there's definitely room to improve in terms of what you can do. But that being said, I think that you've had some tough fights. You're gonna have some more. But that being said, you've played to the best of your ability, and it's been working for you. So I rated you a 5 on that regard. So good job so far. Anthony, do you have anything to add to any of that?
No, nothing. We're done.
Oh, good. Okay.
So I actually disagree with you about Mew. We've had 3 games, and she's brought drastically different sets on 2 of them to my memory. There was a Suicide Mew, and then there was a Cosmic Power Mew. So I think you're actually doing a really good job using that mon, and that mon is hard to use. Like I myself, I was thinking about picking it up at the start of the season, but then I was like, that's just gonna be too hard to use. So
You grab Mewtwo.
congratulations. Yeah, exactly. I go for the second best one. Yeah, I agree with Brady's comments again. At this point, if you're really, if you're really kind of settled into your mons, you kind of got 2 options, right? You either bring a sand team and leave Lunala out, or you bring Lunala and leave the sand team out, right? So the Stoutland, I think the Stoutland's got to go, but the rest of your mons could probably stay with a nice switch on the Stoutland. Also, one thing I'd love to see is more of Seismitoad as a setter instead of just kind of a tank. And just in general, you don't have a ton of like. Well, I guess Gigalith and Stoutland are both kind of recognized rock setters, but if you're bringing one, you're going to bring the other, right? So you might want to think about setters and clears if you switch out Stoutland, but highly recommend that. But if you don't do it, then you kind of have to take each team separately. One thing you could do, one kind of sneaky thing, is to bring goggles on your Lunala so she doesn't take chip from sand. But then you got to watch out for rocks too. So you need to make sure you have defoggers or rapid spinners or so forth. But in general, I've been very super happy to see some really cool play, especially out of the Mew. I think that's really been the star of the show. Well, besides the Mega King-san, double stars of the shows. And I think you played the Infernip surprisingly well too. I loved to see some switch in and switch out and some usage of that. So in general, I think a switch or 2 would be great. Otherwise, just kind of, I say keep focusing your 3 strengths. Lunala, Mew, Mega Kangaskhan can take you pretty far. So
can I make a comment before we move on?
Yeah, sure.
I know you had said maybe ditch the Stoutland. I actually would disagree with Anthony on that.
Really? Okay.
I think Stoutland having both Intimidate and Sand Rush works really, really well on whether or not you're doing a Sand team or you're doing a regular team. Either way, those abilities are super nice. And I believe it's T5, is it not? For a T5 mon, I mean, having a 500 base stat total is pretty solid. It makes it a pretty good mon. So you put all of that together. I don't think that I would recommend ditching this mon. If you have Lunala and you have your Mega, you've got effective ghost answers between Stoutland and between your Mega, so that you can help Lunala out in that regard. So I guess I would not recommend that per se.
Okay. Well, you've got some opinions. I guess I didn't consider the Intimidate too, but all right. Well, make some thoughts. Make some changes if you want, or don't if you want. But it's a good team. It's a good team, and you've been using it well. So
yep.
All right, now on to number 7, Scotty. So we ranked you, Scotty, the Derpy Ducklings, or is it the Derpy Ducklets? My apologies.
DDD
as 7, which I gotta say, fantastic name, fantastic page. I mean, look at all these ducks. Look at them.
Those are some phenomenal ducks.
Yeah. What'd you have to say about this, Brady?
Yeah, so I mean just general comments thus far. I wanna preface this by saying I didn't actually give you a ranking thus far on your play. I think one game isn't sufficient to define what what your team can really do. Um, so I didn't even rank you in that category, to be honest with you. So I just went off of power and then the potential for your team. So um, in terms of your power, obviously rain teams are the strongest weather in Gen 8 in my opinion, and for a lot of people that's kind of the going consensus. So it just naturally has a lot of power. It also has a nice physical special split, which is always nice. I mean, you look at some of the mons you've got. You've got Scizor that you're rocking. You've got Mega Swampert. You've got Poliwrath, but then you've also got things like Kingdra. You've got Latias, and you've got Palkia to kind of back up the other end of that. And then you got Ferrothorn as a check to any dragon moves that are coming in to take advantage of your Kingdra, Latias, and Palkia. That being said, that is a lot of dragon that you're dealing with there, and a lot of that dragon kind of covers itself. Kingdra and Palkia are doing a very similar job. So as of that, that's not necessarily ideal. And having Ferrothorn be the check for that constantly can be a little dangerous because Ferrothorn is exploitable in the fact that even in rain, it still is then just a regular super effective move when somebody's using a fire attack on you, which is less than optimal for that mon especially, but overall, like I said, I like your physical special split here. I like your team. You may want to consider adding another Steelmon to counter any dragon moves that are coming in. But so then I rated the strength as like a 7.5 out of 10. I think there are ways to improve, but that being said, a solid start for sure. Um, I think that your team, in terms of potential, has a lot of potential, and I think that with some clever gameplay, I think that you could likely be a huge problem for other teams inside of the league. We're talking about sand teams, we have a sun team, and now we've got a rain team, and I think rain teams are notorious for being very dangerous against the other two types of weather. So that being said, I think that you're going to have some success in that regard. It's all just a matter of how you're able to prep beforehand, and kind of think about what's my best maneuver in this upcoming game. So, um, that's what I would have to say about all of this. Anthony, do you have anything to add in that regard?
Yes. I do.
I'll keep
Um,
saying it.
I guess
I'll
you
even
will.
say
I
it
guess
with
you will. Not.
more enthusiasm
Oh,
as we
why?
go
Thank
on.
you so much. Um,
Anytime.
so two things I differ from you. Well, a couple things actually. I was kind of surprised by some of your evaluation. I think in terms of Steelmon, Scotty's good. He's got Jirachi, he's got Ferrothorn, he's got Scissor. I mean, those are all strong, tanky Steelmons. If you take any more, I think you get into fighting weaknesses. I mean, he doesn't have a fighting weakness right now, just the Ferrothorn, but you get into more fire weakness, especially
More
if they can.
ground.
Yeah, ground. I know Bug resists it. I don't think Jirachi gets levitate, and I know
Jirachi doesn't get
Ferrothorn
levitate.
resists it. But yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ferrothorn's neutral to
So
it.
like,
Yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't add another Steelmon. That being said, the one thing I and oh, another thing is Palkia and Kingdra. I think you kind of need Palkia or some other. Your team is very physically based, which in general rain teams kind of are. But that's one thing to consider is like a Slowbro Rexus team, right? It except for the Latias and the Palkia that can hit the Thunder. I mean, yes, I think you have it on other Mons, but it's not as threatening, right? Right. So, something to consider is you're very physically based. I, unlike Brady, am super mean and did rate you on your play, even though it was your first game in the league, and I'm sure Jalen prepped a bit for it. Um, but I think it was good, but it was a little straightforward. So I think honestly, I'm expecting you to bounce back from that, and I'm expecting to see a really strong rain team come out very quickly. Um, the very last thing I will say is Cabatops. Starting with your Cabatops last game, I believe you started with it, was an interesting choice just because that's such a glass cannon type mon, right? But to each his own. If you think you can sweep with it, you go for it. But yeah, in general, this is a really strong, really scary team. Um, it's just it has a couple ways, as we've seen, you can play around it. So as long as you're aware of those play around, like other weather or very physically tanky mons, I think you're all set. So, all right. Next up, we've got Tyler T. Hans with the Vatican City Scoliopedes. So your official rank is 6 in the leaderboard. And let's see this beautiful page.
Oh, look
Oh,
at that page.
oh.
That should put him higher on the list just because of how beautiful that one
Well, then
is.
Scotty's page would put him to number 1. So
That's fair. That's fair. All right. Good thing we're not ranking off of your pages.
All right.
Let me start out by saying I ranked you exactly 6. I think that a lot of your team, it hasn't really necessarily changed all that much, but that's not really a bad thing. I think that your team had a lot of strengths. I think that your mega changing was your one big change, but other than that, I think that your team has a lot of strengths to exploit. I love your Tapu Koko with your Halucha. I think those two are amazing together. I think that your Gliscor and your Slow King make a very defensive core. I think your Mega negated a lot of the biggest weaknesses that your team had thus far. You had an Electric weakness, Ice weakness, and a Stealth Rocks weakness, which all 3 of those things were mitigated by your Mon now. So I think that's phenomenal in that own regard. I think that's awesome. Your team is now slightly weak to fire attacks. I mean, you trade one for another in that regard, but overall, I mean, you've got Slow King and Gliscor to back that up, so that's not the end of the world. You just got to be cognizant about that moving forward. And so then, just in terms of your team's natural strength, I gave that a 7. I think that you've made some serious improvements, and I think that you already had a strong team, so great for you in that regard. I think your prepping style thus far has been a little off the shelf and a little wacky. So, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You've gotten some serious success out of that. But that being said, just because it's been so off the shelf and wacky, I think that that kind of took away from the strength of some of your mons. Like you and I were talking about Breloom, right? And Focus Punch Breloom. And although that is definitely a strategy that's
Don't
used
remind
on
me.
Breloom, I will remind you.
Oh no.
I don't think that that's the strongest move to be performing on Breloom. I don't think that it can really be better than its other playstyle, which is Mach Punch Breloom with Technician, which is just an incredibly strong counter to most things, right? Because you can run that, or then you can also run a Bullet Seed on that thing as well, and Bullet Seed also gets affected by Technician. Both of those two things are terrifying on Breloom. So, just a couple of thoughts there in terms of, you have a creative spark, but I would recommend honing in on the strength of several of your mons. A couple of examples that I didn't get to talk to you about yet. I think Rising Voltage on Tapu Koko is such an incredible move. I think that it's so much better than Thunderbolt. I've seen you be using Thunderbolt on that, but Rising Voltage is just phenomenal. It is scary on that mon because it doubles in electric terrain, the power of it. Electric terrain boosts it, and then it's also stab boosted. So it's just so powerful on that mon, and I would highly recommend using that over Thunderbolt. And then also I would say on Scizor, Superpower is probably not the play on that mod. I think that Close Combat might be a better solution for it, just because it has Bullet Punch Technician, and that's a scary moveset, but it needs its strength to make that happen. Otherwise, it's just not nearly as intimidating. So, a few thoughts there about how to prep in the future. So, just because you've had some success, I put this as a 5, but there's still some room to improve there, so I left it as 5. So I said also in terms of your future, in terms of potential, you've got some tough fights coming up in these next few weeks, so do some solid prepping. But that being said, I mean, you've had a lot of tough fights already, and you've been doing well at weathering the storm to some degree, so keep it up, just kind of keep up the prep, and keep up the forethought, and I'm sure that you'll have some serious success with this team. So,
Brady, I'm ashamed. You didn't even mention the star of the team. Not once. Oh my gosh, this guy.
I mentioned it last time.
Ugh.
Come on.
I have been a little disappointed to not see Bidoof come out. I will say. But you know, I understand you're saving it for the playoffs. That's totally
fair. That's
understandable. But no, for real, this team is really solidly put together. It's got a lot of really nice combos. In terms of your play, and if you haven't noticed in this entire video, that's been the thing I've mainly been focusing on, because we've already told you all kind of how we think to shore up your teams, but your play style is new to us, which has been exciting to see. Everybody's got such different play styles. But anyways, back to you, Tyler. Your setup is so creative. Your prep is so creative. You come up with moves that are just like out of left field, which I really love to see. I kind of agree with Brady. It does limit your potential a little bit, but at the same time, I think you've brought really strong sets that are also just kind of off the wall. The problem for me is that I think you maybe oversimplify. It's either oversimplify or overcomplicate, which sounds contradictory, but like for example, in your last game when you had Kiram out and you had already used a fire move, but then you didn't the next time, and I heard from you it was because you were looking at the calc. Like sometimes I think you just have to. That's part experience because Aegislash is a weird mon, but I've seen a couple moves from you where it's like predict what the opponent does and then do kind of the most solid option rather than, because I can't get into your brain while you're in a game, but I feel like you're either really overthinking it and thinking they're going to do some crazy maneuver, or you're underthinking it, which looking at your prep I think isn't likely. So maybe just sometimes it is okay to go with the big damage move, and that instead of the insane Omega Brain predict. But yeah, I continue to see your play improve, every game. So I'm very excited and a little scared as I have not fought this team yet. So I'm going to have to do some solid prep against it. But yeah, Rising Voltage is the other thing. And I still haven't seen Rising Voltage Electric Seed Halucha, which I would love to see. But I don't remember if it was good against your previous matchups or not. So I think that's understandable given 4 games.
And I mean, he was up against a cat team. I mean, there's no winning in that. So that's tough, man.
Dude, the Vatican City doesn't have any cats. You don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, that's brutal. That's tough.
Lovely. All right. Next up, we have Noah, Captain Pufferfish or Power. Proceed with Risk at rank number 5. I believe he's done his page too. It's very nice. It's yellow
very
and orange.
Nice. It's proceed with risk.
Yeah,
there's even a little caution symbol right there. Very nice.
Mm-hmm. But
all right. Well, let me kick off this ranking, Noah. So for your team, the power ranking in of itself didn't change. I still rated your team as an 8 out of 10. I think that the power of your team is very, very solid. With the exception, I guess you didn't have DNC before. And looking over your team, I don't think that you are super ground weak, but you're getting more close to that. So that is something that you're going to have to keep in mind. Between Aegislash, Sorora, DNC, Volcarona, which is, I guess, neutral, so that's kind of a null point, but Tentacruel. You've got some mons that are weak to ground now, so I expect to see Tornadus in more and more of your games, probably to kind of mitigate against that. But that also means that there's a slight degree of predictability, with that as well. So I'm just now looking at your roster right there, and that's the wrong Tornadus. It hurts. Obviously your tanks are still as tanky as ever, so they're phenomenal. Minor ice and electric weaknesses, but a lot of your mons can counter that to some degree, so that's less of a concern. And I think that the addition of the Yancy is good because it also allows that you to have a specially attacking kind of scary mon to fight up against, besides Volcarona. I think Volcarona was kind of carrying that before, and with the addition of the Yancy, I think that you now have another mon that can kind of provide that kind of baseline scary element. So that's nice too. So I rated you as an 8 out of 10 in terms of your team comp. In terms of your preparation, you've made a lot of strides. You've made some serious improvement. There is definitely improvement still yet to come. But that being said, Noah, you've been doing a phenomenal job in prepping in your games. You've been asking the right questions, and I've just seen you grow a lot in that category. So before, whereas I think that you were very much so relying on other people, I think now you're starting to come into your own as to how you want to play your mons. And I think you're starting to realize the strength of your mons, and you're starting to kind of come up with your own strategies. So I gave you a 6 out of 10 on that. I think that you're slowly getting better, and I'm excited to see where you can move forward in the future too. And then I said for your future in terms of this, you've had a lot of really tough opponents already. And you're coming into your own, and you've had some success already, even though you've gone up against some people that I would consider very difficult so far. So I would say that in your future fights, I think that it's probably going to be looking pretty positive for you. So I actually gave you an 8 out of 10 in this region. I think that you got a lot of potential here. So that is my ranking. Anthony, what was your ranking? See how I changed that just for you?
Oh, thank you, dude. Thank you. Well, so this team in general, it's really good. I can't, as someone who lost to this team, I can't say too much bad about it. Rather, I can afford a warning to all who go against it to take it very seriously, because it's got a lot of hidden threats too. Like, I don't look at this team and am immediately like, oh my gosh. But really, if you look, I mean, Zygrade, Zerora, Volcarona, they're all like super strong hidden threats. Aegislash is just so tough to get through. So, and just the tank on this team is like chalk. You know what I'm saying? So, I I'd say that you've been uh, very creative as well in your sets. I've seen some fun stuff come out, but you've stuck more to the standard than our previous team, and you've brought some straightforward killer sets. You've made some good choices in game too. You made some good swaps, some good buff moments that we don't have to remember. So, yeah, I am. I'm pretty happy with this team. I think it's very solid. It's not like the the scariest team I've ever seen, but it's just a really solid team, and it's got a player that's getting more and more solid every fight behind it, which is fear the man who becomes strong after many fights, not the man who wins one. So uh, I'm excited to see if this team does some pretty cool shenanigans towards the playoffs. So, all right, and I'm realizing we didn't talk about the playoffs at the start of this video, so we will mention those at the end of this video.
Ooh,
instead.
spoiler!
Um, okay. Next, we had number 4 in JayJayVanBaeBae, or Kai Has Returned. Gotta say, I love how the Kung Fu Panda just spread and infected everyone.
It looks so good too. That edit looks phenomenal.
It's lovely. It's lovely. So,
good.
Thank you for the beautiful page on our eyes, and now we'll have some beautiful voice in our ears. So, Brady.
Oh wow, I have a lot to live up to with that one. I'm gonna be straight with you before I even start, Jalen. I ranked you 8 across the board for all 3 categories. Let me explain why. But overall, you've just been very solid so far. So, your team, in terms of its natural power, nothing really changed from my last ranking. So, I would just say Marshadow, Metagross, Hydreigon, just super scary mons, and they all can kind of work off of each other very well. I love your Fire, Water, Grass regen core. That's so terrifying. I mean, just those 6 mons right there just make a phenomenal team because they cover each other so well. So I think that is phenomenal in of itself. Um, I think that you have a minor weakness to rock, but on it just because of Ho-Oh, and I think that's been exploited before. But you are very cognizant of that when you're going into your games, so just keeping that in mind going forward, I think that that's pretty well mitigated against. Um, yeah, just with your regenerators, you've got a solid stall team, and you've got a good chance of just winning by itself. So just keep up the solid switching. I think one of my biggest notes for you always is just try to play like you're trying to predict your opponent's next move. And sometimes that's pretty easy because your opponent is just spamming a move, in which case you can switch to a regenerator that can take that move better, and then you're trying to advance on that Pokemon with that regenerator, or you're trying to do a double switch and switch to another Mon that then can take advantage of that next move. So your strategy should typically be I'm trying to learn as much information as I can about the opponent's moves using my regenerators, and then I start bringing out threats that can counter those other threats, if that makes any sense. It's not always that ideal, and it doesn't always work that way, but using that same format, if you're just playing around your opponent, a lot of times you can just work through their team that way, and you can figure out your best chance to beat them. So that's something that I would highly recommend. Um, and then next, I just in terms of your gameplay and your prep, I think that you have done a phenomenal job prepping. Actually, I think that your prep thus far has been very, very educated. I think that you have really applied yourself and you've learned a lot through. And you still ask questions. Don't get me wrong, but that being said, you come up with your own ideas, and they're very creative and they're very damaging to your opponent. I'm going to call out your game against Scotty in particular. That game, you came up with a lot of those ideas that in the end made you win that game as well as you did. So I think that it all relies on your own intelligence at the end of the day, and that really came out and shined right there. So you really learned a lot, and you're starting to kind of learn weaknesses of teams and exploit those weaknesses, which is, I mean, that's in the end of the day, that is preparation. That is what you need to do. So that is phenomenal. I love that aspect that you've been working on there. So I gave you an 8 out of 10 for that. And then finally, looking forward to the future here. You've had some tough matches thus far. Um, I know the last fight that you had maybe wasn't necessarily your favorite, but that being said, you fought through, and now I think that your upcoming fights, I think that you've got some pretty good matchups against your opponents. So I mean, I just expect your team to flourish from here. So this is awesome to see, and I can't wait to see how that works for you in the future. So
Yeah, this was a a recent fight and a very difficult fight, no matter how it looked. I mean, I know Jalen, I don't think he believes me, but like our fight was way closer than it seemed on paper. So, uh he one thing I will say is I think he's already starting to do exactly what you described. I mean, in our fight, he kind of played around my Mewtwo until he knew a couple of moves. He played around my Greninja till he knew a couple of moves. I mean, he was predicting my attacks and switches pretty well. Uh, the one thing I would say, the only thing I really could say about this team is that because of just naturally how that is, I think one of the things I was trying to exploit going into this game against your team was because you have so many tanks, it's really easy to set up on you, right? So the thing you have to do is with a tank team like this, you have to either be aware of that or have something that can really counter that, right? So like actually I'm not even sure if Ho-Oh gets dual wing beat, but like dual wing beat breaks sub and then attacks, or like having paralyzing moves on some of your tanks, which now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure if your tanks do learn paralyzing moves, but
I'm pretty sure Ho-Oh learned Thunderwave.
because if you have to switch in, by that time it's normally already too late. So it's it's a really really scary team, but you just always have to be aware of that at any point your opponent could come in. So you have to be ready to click some kind of devastating move. And to that end, you're going to have to be a little more creative because although your prep is amazing, like you prep really cool sets on your tanks, you don't have a lot of room for cool moves, right? If you've got to take, toxic and protect and recover and whatever, it's hard to get creative sets in there. So yeah, just something to watch out for. It's really hard to prep for, but in general, with those regenerators, it's not as big of a deal because you can switch them around so much. And because you have all those 3-core typings, you can switch them around enough to where even if someone does set up on you, it's difficult for them to sweep you right off the bat. So, do highly agree with what Brady said, and except for the part where I think you're already kind of coming into your own as far as predicting moves, and that alone has been just terrifying. I had to prep for this team after seeing your games. I was like, oh my gosh. So good work so far, and excited to see where it goes. All right. Next up, we have Emuhunter, the super terrific dudes, was it? The super talented dudes. My apologies, or STD.
I can't even believe you got STD wrong. It's so sad.
What a shame. So
what an absolute shame.
What do you have to say about this, Brady?
Speaking of shame, look at that sheet. I'm so this is my little brother, so I get to say these kind of things. I'm disappointed in you. You can do better.
He really could. He really could. Put in some Comic Sans.
Come on, you could do more than that. Alright, so to start off, I reduced you got an 8 overall here as well. But that being said, your scores were a little bit different than previous scores. And one of the reasons that I say that is because I reduced the power ranking that I gave previously to your Mons. I think that your Mons can definitely be scary in the sun. I think with the addition of other weather setters now, it's going to be a lot harder for you to keep it up. So that in of itself. And then I think some of your Mons, like I didn't realize, I thought Shaman Sky learned Sleep Powder. It doesn't, unfortunately. So that in of itself kind of lowered your ability to deal damage. It lowered the versatility of your Mons in a lot of ways. So that in of itself, that lowered the power ranking of your Mons, which is ironic because this has been my L so far. Camden was the only person that's beaten me thus far, so I'm lowering his power ranking, but he also beats me. So, and I think the reason for that actually is the next part. I think Camden has done an insane job at prepping so far. I think Camden actually has gotten the highest ranking for me. I gave him a 9 out of 10 in that regard, in terms of his actual prep work and his play inside of games. Camden doesn't always make the right plays inside of games. But that being said, more often than not, you're making an optimal play. And that is very hard to deal with on a team that basically can one-shot any Mon if it's making the right moves. So you see this time and time again with like Mamoswine. You see this with Terrakion. I mean, those Mons in of themselves, Shaman Sky, those Mons are so scary just by themselves. Also, I think your Torkoal plays have been incredibly unique and funny, and I suffered against them personally. So I gave you a 9 out of 10 in that regard because A, you're prepping all this by yourself, and B, you're doing it in a way that it is very unique every single game, and it's a very solid build. So, and then finally, potential. I would have ranked you higher, but I gave you 8 out of 10 specifically because there are so many other weathers now. And now Sun is going to be the hardest one to keep up, and it's going to be a little bit more dangerous than the other ones. Because if you think you've got a sand setter who's a rockmon, which rock's going to counter fire, and then you've got your rain setter that's going to counter sun as well. So now between all of the weathers, your Torkoal is going to be under the most fire, no pun intended. So that is something that you're going to be having to deal with. But overall, I still think that your team has a positive matchup in a lot of the teams that it's going up against. So I give you an 8 out of 10 in that regard. So very solid play so far, and I'm looking forward to see what you can do in the future, man. So
Yeah.
that's all I have to say.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. This team is terrifying. It was terrifying when it was created, even though it's like such a, I don't know, it's very Gen centric, and yet it's still terrifying, which is kind of funny in Gen 8. But I only got more scared after watching you play, because your play is very good. It's very crisp. You know when to switch out. There aren't. I mean, it's not perfect. There are blunders here and there, but it's just very solid overall, which definitely adds to it. Yeah, I didn't have too much negative to say about this team. I really don't think at this point, other than the double Venusaur, I still don't like that. It just bothers me to my core, but whatever.
He hasn't really employed it yet, so like in that regard, it's kind of like, well, if you're just gonna mega it anyways, then why not just do the mega? So I mean, that is definitely something to consider there, Camden. But yeah.
Like, I get that you can bring a different item, but I don't know if that's worth an entire mon for. So, something to consider. But the rest of your team really strong, really scary, and you're playing it really well. So, I don't think I can say too much negative about this team in general. So, yeah. All right. Next, we've got Brady, who ranked himself too low. But whatever, he's at 2.
I was gonna say, I guys, the system is not rigged. I promise you, I did not rate Anthony and I first and second. I ranked myself third, but unfortunately, I got dragged to the top here, so that's fine.
Absolutely rated us first and second. Suck it, everybody. Here. Now you can see his glorious page as well. But
oh yeah, fantastic.
All right, Brady, tell us about yourself.
Hey everyone. So I ranked my personal the team strength. I rated it as around a 7 to an 8. I couldn't really decide in that regard. I think that my team has a lot of strengths. I think that it has some significant weaknesses as well. So you put both of those two things together, and it's like, it's got something going for it. So I really like my T1, my T2, and my Mega. I think those 3 Mons in particular are very dangerous in how they play well with one another. 2 of those Mons having Intimidate is also very nice to have a solid Intimidate core that can really counter each other's weaknesses. So it's very easy for me to use that against physical Mons. So I think that is nice. I've got a lot of physical Mons on my team, however. As you can see, I mean, I've got Dragonite, which I guess can do either or. I've got Solgaleo, I've got Dialga, I've got Lando. So just I've got Mega Gyarados. I've got a lot of physical Mons on my team, and not a lot of special Mons. So as a result, that is a weakness in my team that I think people have been trying to take advantage of thus far. And then I'm also slightly weak to electric attacks. So an electric ground type coverage is very good against my team, because the things that electric isn't really good into in my team, ground typically is as well. So like there's that for just kind of an analysis there. I don't think there's a clear answer to dragon types besides Solgaleo on my team, unfortunately. Rabombi, I would love to say that Rabombi is that answer, but Rabombi currently is 0-2 for a reason. So my boy, he's been putting in some work, but he's definitely not going to be a check. So, okay, so that's why I ranked myself. I ranked myself from a 7 to an 8. I wasn't really sure on how to do that one. And then in terms of my prepping, I think that my prep work has been solid going into games thus far. I ranked myself as an 8.5 on this one. I think I could have done a better job, but that being said, I'm proud of my team, and my team has a lot of different traits that I can kind of take advantage of in different games. So I've been able to kind of play around that a little bit and experiment with different mons, and I've seen some success because of that. So that's kind of fun. And then finally, just upcoming games. I like some of my matchups, and I dislike some of my matchups coming up here. So I gave myself an 8 out of 10 for this one. I think my team's strong enough to the point where I can just rely on it, and I think that I'll be winning some of them, but we'll see. So that's where I went with that. So, Anthony, how did you rank me?
Yeah. So if I had to liken your team to a spirit animal, you would be a charging bull, right? So
Lion,
this
but
thing,
yeah,
no,
continue.
no, no, bull. This thing is gonna run you down and gore you, right? And it's faster than you, it's stronger than you. It's just good. Um, so your team is just so solidly put together. Every game, you just bring hard hitting, like super destructive moves to it. Um, the only thing I could say about your playstyle is it feels very like straightforward, like this mon does this kind of thing, which is good because then you're playing a lot to the strengths. But like earlier, how you said Rabombi can't be a check, yeah, technically no, but if you predict a Draco Meteor and throw in a Rabombi, I've seen some games where that pops off, right, and then you hit them with a Moonblast because you're faster, right? So like you use your mons really well, but they kind of only do what they're quote unquote meant to, which does give them maximum damage, but doesn't leave a ton to surprise. You know what I mean? So like that would be the only thing I would say. Other than that, like this team is scary. I'm not gonna beat it. I ranked it number one. It's strong. It's just straightforward. It kills and it's tanky. Like it kills and it's tanky. It's not fair. You're supposed to have one or the other. But
I got me some bruisers, man. It's hard.
uh,
It's hard to beat all these cats. I gotta
I know.
say.
Cats. Uh, but yeah, that's all I'd say about that. Really, just terrifying team. Terrifying. Underranked from Brady, but it's fine. It's fine.
Sure, sure.
All right, and last but not but least, we've got the Whooshy Finger Hold me as number one, despite my performance not necessarily being number one.
Oh my
So
gosh.
so tell me about myself.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about yourself. So, since the beginning, we haven't your team hasn't changed. So there's nothing new for me to add. I'll just go over some of my previous points for you. Um, it's a really well built team, incredibly balanced. It's very difficult, as you can see from the Thanos meme. It's very difficult to deal with, and it's gonna be hard to find checks and counters to a lot of these mons that don't also counter the counters to the mon. If that makes any sense, it's a lot of counters. But that being said, your mons do a very good job of checking themselves. Um, I think that you've got a lot of solid tanks on your team that kind of function differently but similarly, which is nice. Um, your dark fighting psychic core is particularly nasty. Any one of them could potentially sweep a game if you're not careful. I think I might have overestimated Yveltal a little bit, but that being said, even in that last game, Yveltal proved itself. It's just a bruiser. It is very tough to take down, and it's not. It's got almost base 100 speed. It is not slow. So by any stretch of the imagination, Yveltal is still a scary mon. Um, so I think all of that put together, I think that's scary and that's fun. You've got a slight weakness to fairy type, but honestly, you cover yourself pretty well too in that regard. So it's nothing that you can't overcome. So I would say the biggest downside thus far that I've seen, and this was the lowest ranking out of the 3 that I gave for you, was your prepping and your play. And that's just because in my experience looking at your team, I don't think that you've been giving these mons the credit where credit's due in a way. Um, I think you've over prepped in some games, but in other games you've critically under prepped, and I think that's kind of come back to bite you occasionally. And so that has been, I think, the biggest downside to this team so far. You've got an incredibly strong team. I rated it 9 out of 10. But that being said, breathing some more life into these mons and kind of going, okay, what is my opponent realistically going to be bringing to this next game? And then trying to counter it from there. That is a vital step in terms of dealing with people and their problems, and that's kind of that I haven't really seen that with this team until really this last game that you just played. Until that game, I haven't really seen you put in the love to these mons, and then in this last game, you totally flipped turned and you did the 180, and now it's like, oh my gosh. So I love to see that. I love to see you giving some love to them. Um, and so then obviously my third one for you, I think that you've got a bunch of positive matchups coming up here. I think that your team has some versatility and it has a lot of potential, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here. So I rated your potential as an 8 out of 10 as well. So
Yeah, I entirely agree. To be quite honest, losing to Noah really it kind of started a fire under me, right? Um, but yeah, like the team is well set up. It's got a lot of checks. I will say I've noticed that my tanks can all kind of be, especially if I don't bring 3 of them. If I do bring just 2, um, they can kind of be countered by similar things I noticed while prepping for that last game. But they also cover each other well. The only problem is I have to bring one or the other, right? If I have to bring Fortress and Mudstale, then I have no special tanks, right? So that means both of my tanks are incredibly weak to special attacking mons, right? So
mm-hmm.
I'm a little limited in that regard, but at the same beat, if I can bring one special and one physical, like I cover myself very well. Um, Prepping is just gonna be big for me. In general, I just need to do it more. Um, and yeah, I think y'all saw the results last game, but even then, I think I could have. I don't know. I feel like I even overthought some things and underthought some others. So um, I think there's a little room to grow there. But in general, I'm pretty happy with where I'm at and fired up for the rest of the season, except for the Brady game. And actually, I haven't looked at who else I'm playing that much, but I saw Brady and I was like,
You
oh,
heard it here first, folks. He's scared.
I am.
He's
I'm
shaking his little
terrified.
booties.
Yes, absolutely. So the cats will reign,
The
but
cats are
yeah,
soon
this
to be out of
team,
them.
I'm just very very happy with this team. This team was
It
my baby, and it just worked out. It just worked out. So
it did, and it is like I'll keep reiterating the same point. It is a very difficult team to find a chink in the armor for. I think that without using some sets that I don't think Anthony could expect, I think that this team is going to be very difficult to beat on a straight one-on-one. Just him going at it with his mons and you going at it with the mons that he's expecting. I think that it'll likely spell doom for most people. So I think you kind of, to beat Anthony's team, you almost have to think outside of the box. So
yeah, I will not expect something like random. That has proven to be my weakness in the past. So
Hocus
um,
Punch, baby. Works.
oh
If it works
my
once, it works
gosh,
just
I'm
that
never
once, but
gonna
it
live
works
that
really
down.
well.
I'm never gonna live that down, bro. But um, but all right. With that, uh, I believe we have finished up the rankings. Any final thoughts on the rankings before we move on, Brady?
No, I mean, like Anthony, and I want to preface this, everyone. Like Anthony said at the beginning of all of this, Guys, we had to rank everyone versus each other in this regard, but every single team has its own pluses and minuses, and I think everybody's doing a great job so far. I just think that there's some things that everyone can improve on in different ways. So that being said, everyone, you're doing a great job. Don't be disheartened if you see this list and you're lower on the list, or don't be too ecstatic if you're higher on the list. Don't let it go to your head. I mean, these are just our opinions and all of this and how we're seeing the games play out. So. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to talk to us or ask us. As I said before, I'm always Thursdays from 6 to 8. I'm hosting the Poke Talk in the general chat. So feel free to come at any time and just ask me any questions in terms of what you'd like to see in the future, or just if you have any general questions about Pokemon play. I'd be happy to try to help as much as I can. So.
Yeah, I have to concur with you. Before this all started, I literally told Brady in the call, I was like, there are so many people that I hate it when I see the number next to them, but there's just everybody feels like they could be really strong. So especially considering where some of y'all came from in terms of Pokemon experience. So
Oh my gosh,
again,
yes.
thank you so much for really taking to this. It's just been it's been real heartwarming, and it's been wonderful. So we really love to see it. Thank you all, and yeah, let's get it for the rest of the season. And speaking of that, we are going to officially announce how we are going to do playoffs. So Brady, do you want to explain it, or should I?
I can start, and if you got anything to add, feel free to go in on
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
So
go for it.
playoffs will be from the top 6 players in terms of your win-loss ratio. That being said, in terms of if there's a tie between wins, we break it down then from your kill ratio in terms of kills versus deaths on Mons. So if you have closer games, even if you're losing them, that's technically still a plus for you. So don't, even if you're losing inside of a game, don't get disheartened. Just remember that in the end of the game, that might be something that puts you ahead. So all of that to be said, those are the qualifiers that we're going to be looking at if for playoffs. Um, and there's going to be the top 6 players. That being said, in the playoffs, we'll do a 2v2 for 3 different teams. And then after the fact, after that's done, then there will be 2 players, and then 1 player will get a bye week, and that player will be the top ranked player that is still left inside of the tournament. So it's a little hard for me to explain, but I'll try to break it down. Let's say that you are the number 1 ranking before you went in to playoffs, and you win your first game in the playoffs. That means that you for sure have the top seat, and you will have a bye week then. So then you won't be doing 3 fights; you'll just be doing 2 fights. Versus if you're lower inside of in the playoffs tier, then you'll be doing all 3 fights to potentially take the victory. So there is an incentive to trying as hard as you can in terms of, like I said before, kill ratio, but also in terms of just game 1. So keep that in mind towards the end of the season. That's how we're going to be doing this. And then another thing that we're also trying to implement is a lower bracket as well. So that'll be the bottom 4 players. We'll be doing a match there, and it's mainly for fun. I mean, it's not for the title at that point. But that being said, we would like it if we had a lower bracket and an upper bracket, and after the upper bracket's done, I mean, whoever wins that wins the title already, just hands down. But that being said, we also wanted the option of having a fun game between the winner of the lower bracket and the winner of the upper bracket, and seeing how that goes. And again, totally optional. It's not a thing that needs to happen, but we'd love to see it, and we'd love to see some participation for that, because I think that'd be very cool to see too. So
Yeah, if you win between the lower bracket game and the upper bracket game, you get bragging rights that you
that's
won.
true.
But you didn't actually win, but you absolutely get bragging rights that you
You
won the
do.
entire thing. So
They might have taken home the gold, but that being said, you're better than the gold. So like, that's kind of a plus.
yep, yep, yep.
And then in terms of incentive, I'll let Anthony talk about this a little more. He's been kind of spearheading this even more than I have. So
Well, yes, yes. And before we get on to that, I wanted to double mention for any of you that are not familiar, I'm not sure, I didn't think you mentioned this, but playoff games are 2 out of 3 games you have to win, and you have to bring the same team for all 3 games. So that's kind of to eliminate any kind of complaints, I guess, about, oh my gosh, you brought such a weird jank set. If they lose to you in the first game and then they lose to you in the second game, they lost to you, right? So there'll be 2 out of 3, and as Brady said, we'll have 1 week. Then whoever, if the number 1 seed does lose their game, the number 2 seed will get a bye week, and so on down
Yes.
the list. So that gives you an incentive to take it away from, I believe Camden is still at the top, although not all the scores from this week have come in. But gives you an incentive to take it away from Camden, so you better watch out, Camden. But yes, so moving on to incentive, the winner of this entire thing will receive the coveted Pokemon Draft League trophy, where we actually have a real trophy that you will get a title for, as well as a mystery gift that we have prepared that will be coming along with that. The trophy title, if we ever do have another one, the title goes to whoever the champion is. So if you win and then you lose the next season because you're bad, then you have to give up the trophy, but you get to keep the special prize. So it should be kind of a cool little victory thing to actually have a prize for winning this tournament. So
Think about it this way. All your friends are going to be looking at you in awe and splendor as you can display this trophy that you are the Draft League champion. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that right there, folks. So.
Oh, geez. Well, it gives a nice little prize other than bragging rights, which we all know bragging rights is the most important, but it gives a fun little conclusion to the tournament. So, but I believe other than that, we've kind of covered all the topics we wanted to talk about. Is there anything else, Brady?
Nope, that's it for me at least. So.
Well, all right. I'd like to just say thank you again, everyone. It has truly been a blast playing with y'all. Y'all doing great. Y'all are gonna do great. And I am very excited to see how everything goes. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited as well. I can't wait to see the rest of your guys' games, and I hope to see everyone in either whichever bracket that they're going into, and I hope to make this a fun thing for everyone. So I hope all you gamers and gamer girls have a fantastic night.
All right. This has been the official Pokemon Draft Duo signing off. Goodbye.